Hey guys, welcome back to Floki's Models. In this update, we will paint, weather, and build a simple base for the P-38 Lightning. So let's jump into the painting. Gonna start off with airbrushing some Alclad II Duraluminum on both sides of the cockpit, in preparation for hairspray chipping to come later. After the Alclad Duraluminum is set up, I spray a layer of hairspray over the top of it. I give this 2 thin layers. Then, after the hairspray is dried, I mix up some Tamiya XF1 Flat Black, thinned 1:1 with Mr. Leveling Thinner. I use this to do a pre-shading, hitting all the panel lines first. Then I spray a random model pattern between all the lines, focusing on the center of panels. The next color up is Mr. Color 13 Neutral Gray, United States Air Force. Thin 2 parts paint to 3 parts Mr. Leveling Thinner. To start off with, I spray a random modeling pattern, focusing on panel centers. Then focus on coverage, going panel by panel. Then to finish it all off, an overall light coverage of every panel. I also base coated the superchargers with this Mr. Color Neutral Gray. Next I mix around 25% of Tamiya XF19 Sky Gray into the Mr. Color Neutral Gray, and thin this down to 2 parts paint to 3 parts thinner. Again starting with a random modeling pattern in the center of panels, then a quick once over of the entire section. Next is a mix of 1 part Tamiya XF49 Kahki to 3 parts XF62 Olive Drab, thinned 1:1 with Mr. Leveling Thinner. When these was shipped from the United States, some of the panels was taped over that caused some interesting fading on the nose section of these aircraft. I spray over the panel lines on the nose and will mask them with Tamiya 2mm masking tape for curves. Next color is Tamiya XF49 Kahki, thinned 1:1 with Mr. Leveling Thinner. You can see the taped over panel lines using that 2mm Tamiya masking tape for curves. Again, to start on the top surfaces, I spray a random modeling pattern in the center of panels. I then start focusing on coverage, but only on the leading edge panels of the wings. Last color is Tamiya XF62 Olive Drab, thinned 2 parts paint to 3 parts thinner. Like every other time, I start with a random modeling pattern in the center of panels, but skip the leading edge panels that was sprayed khaki for the time being. Then after all the other panels are painted, I start to feather in the olive drab into the khaki. Then comes the so satisfying part of removing all my paint masks. Now I'm going to start chipping the paint on both sides of the cockpit using tap water to reactivate the hairspray and scrubbing with an old paintbrush, and I also use a toothpick. Now, this really didn't come out 100% to my liking, but I was so happy with the color modulation that I was able to achieve with the rest of the paint job that I decided just to leave it as is instead of scrubbing and possibly ruining my entire paint job and having to start over from the beginning. But in the end, it's not really too bad. The decals went down over a gloss coat and sealed in with a second gloss coat. Then all the panel lines was hit with an oil wash of bitume. That was let to dry for a day, then the excess was removed with a paper towel moist with some odorless thinner. Then the ID and landing lights get a coat of chrome using a Molotov marker. I dab some onto a piece of cardboard and apply it with a paintbrush. The landing light lenses get glued in place using this micro-scale micro crystal clear. Then the ID lights get hit with Tamiya clear blue, red, and orange. And the lenses glued in with more of the micro-scale micro crystal clear. Moving over to weathering the tires, they get a dusting of MIG Gulf Sand Pigment. Now using some Vallejo light gray and a ripped off section of a makeup sponge, I add variation to the surface of the superchargers by basically chipping them with this color. What it's looking like so far. Next is Vallejo Ivory. I repeat the same sponge chipping to add variation to the superchargers. Again, how it's looking. Next, the superchargers are given an overall wash of Abteilung 502 Dark Rust. This is thinned down with a VMS Oil Expert. Again, how it's looking. Comparison to one that hasn't been washed yet. Then I use light rust from Abteilung 502 and give it a pin wash just in the recesses. And again, how it's looking. Then I stipple dark rust over the surface. Followed by light rust. It looks a little funny now, but it will darken up a lot once it's dry. After all the pieces got a flat coat of Mr. Color of Matte, the tail booms get installed in place. Just a little glue at the front is all that is needed. The fit is so good that the tail section doesn't need any glue at all. These just snap into place. Then the superchargers are slid into place. landing gear doors install so easily. I added just a bit of CA glue to make sure they stay in place. Now to build a simple base for the Lightning. I 3D printed 60 sections of Marston Mats on my Alugo Saturn. A link will be in the description for the files that I used. The files are in 1/35, but are easily converted and scaled down to 1/48. I add the first piece to the base with CA glue, and then I can build the pattern out from there. These are easily cut with a pair of old sprue cutters, and the edges filed smooth. After all the mats are down, they get a coat of 1 part Tamiya XF1 flat black to 3 parts XF54 dark sea gray, thinned 1:1 with Mr. Leveling Thinner. Then some Vallejo light gray is sponge chipped over the matte surface. Abteilung 502 oils, dark rust, light rust, and dust will be used to weather the mats. First up is the dark rust. It is just sponged on randomly. Then the light rust is sponged over the surface. So hopefully you can get an idea of how it's looking. Then I take the dark rust and stipple it over the entire surface. Followed with the same thing with the light rust. Then dust is used as a pin wash in the recessed areas. Then lightly stippled over the mats. The rest of the foam is painted with Vallejo Iraqi Sand. Then a layer of matte Mod Podge is painted on. Followed up by a sprinkling of Woodland Scenic's very fine sand ballast. This is sprinkled onto the mats and brushed into the holes and off the majority of the surface. Scenic glue is dropped in to lock it all in place. And now for the finished shots. Thank you all so much for watching. I mean, this has been the best engineered, best fitting kit that I've ever built. I mean, even for Tamiya standards, this is, you know, just up and beyond what the normal well-fitting Tamiya kit is. I would recommend this 100% to anyone. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this build. Let me know down in the comments what you think. Give it a like and subscribe if you haven't yet. My next build is going to be a Battle of the Bulge group build, and I will leave a link in the description to my buddy Greg's video on how to join the group build. Well, again, thank you all so much for watching, and stay tuned for many more builds to come.